Okay, ladies and gentlemen, a review of these Flexcut carving knives. Now, I want to say at the outset, I'm not a professional carver and I don't consider myself to be an expert, but I've been carving and doing other forms of woodwork on and off for 25-30 years, so I don't consider myself to be a total numpty either. And this hasn't been sponsored by Flexcut or anyone who sells their tools, or indeed by anyone at all. So what you're about to hear is my honest, unbiased opinion on these. Flexcut are an American brand. I don't know what it's like in America. Maybe they're ubiquitous, you can get them in Walmart, who knows. Over here in the UK there are not many shops that stock their products, and there wasn't any shop reasonably near me that stocked them, so I had to order these online. Now, I'd rather go into a shop, handle the thing, make my own assessment of the quality of it, especially with a tool, before buying it, and then if it isn't any good, obviously it would be easier to return it. So if I'm ordering something like this online, I will quite often look online for a review. So if you're in a similar situation to me, then hopefully this will help you out. This particular occasion, I was lucky enough to be able to borrow a Flexcut knife from a friend of mine and try it out before placing my order, so I kind of knew what I would be getting. So what I've got here is what Flexcut call the roughing knife, the detail knife and the cutting knife, and these are all available individually, but I did buy them as a set. You get a set of 3 knives, this tool roll to keep them in, and a block of Flexcut gold polishing compound, which is worth saying a few words about in and of itself, so we'll come back to that later. Obviously buying them as a set you get them a little bit cheaper, and because I had to buy them online it meant I only paid one delivery charge. So let's start by looking at the blades. These are a straight cutting edge. If I can get that to focus on the knife and not on me. There we go. And I quite like that. Now that's just a matter of personal preference really. It's going to depend on how you work, how you like to actually carve. What I do find with a straight cutting edge is it's very easy to precisely control the line that the point of the blade takes when you're passing through the work. So I quite like that. I do find that these are great for convex surfaces, the outside of curves, not so good for concave, so the inside of curve. You probably might be better off with a curved cutting edge to do insides of curves as opposed to outsides. This black coating is just an anti-corrosion coating, and these have a pretty flat grind, which again I like in a carving tool. For a general purpose knife, a more Scandinavian grind might be more robust, but again I find a flat grind and that absolutely flat bevel makes for very precise cutting when you're carving. These are reasonably thick blades. I don't know, I think Flexcut gained their name because supposedly their blades bend and don't break, but that's kind of the minimum I'd expect from a reasonably well-tempered tool. These are not really flexible. They are pretty stiff, and actually 99 times out of 100 that's a good thing. I can think of very few occasions where I would want the blade to flex whilst I'm cutting. With this particular set, I've found that the roughing knife I've used quite a lot, and actually although it's called the roughing knife, you can do reasonably detailed work with this. Again, if we can get it to the camera to focus on that blade, you can see it has a reasonably acute tip, and you can actually take really fine shavings with it, as well as having the confidence that it's robust enough to take off some big chips. The detail knife, I have to say, I don't find particularly good for carving details because it doesn't have a very acute tip. I can understand why you would give it that slightly rounded shape to make it a bit more robust, but if I'm doing detail work then I'm going to be removing small amounts of wood, and I would find something with a really acute point more useful. Something like a craft knife, what our American cousins would call an X-Acto knife, is what I would expect in a detail knife. And actually I have seen that Flexcut are now producing a mini detail knife which looks like it has a thinner blade and it has a finer point, so that might be preferable to this detail knife. The cutting knife well, okay, it's a slightly daft name. 99 out of 100 knives are designed for cutting. There's only very few specialised designs for fighting that are only for stabbing or for scraping or spreading something. But quite apart from that, it kind of falls into no man's land between these other two blades. For me anyway, and this again is personal preference, it might depend on how you work, but this cutting knife is a little bit shorter than the roughing knife, but it's about the same thickness and it's just as broad really front to back. So there are relatively few occasions where that little bit less length will fit into a space of a carving, but you don't need a thinner, narrower blade. So really I find I very rarely use that, to be honest. I tend to work with the roughing knife for roughing out and right through to a reasonable level of detail, and then I might break out the detail knife to get into some tighter areas of a carving. The most important thing to say about these blades is that these are the sharpest tools I've ever bought straight out of the box. Out of the packaging, these are razor sharp, really, really good. To take something like that Mora knife as an example, this Mora Companion, I have bought Mora tools which have been very good, and under their Eric Frost brand banner as well. But that I actually had to touch up a bit in sharpness myself before I was happy to use it. And I don't consider myself to be particularly great at sharpening, so that's not good. It's easier to maintain a sharp edge which the manufacturer has provided to you than to get the blade to the degree of sharpness you want in the first place. At least that's what I find. These Flexcut tools were, as it says on here, extremely sharp straight out of the packaging. They were really, really good, and they've maintained that edge well. Obviously, if you have a blade which is very, very sharp but which doesn't hold that sharpness, that's not much good. I will say I've had these for a bit more than a year now. I've used them for many, many hours, and I haven't had to put too much effort into sharpening them, but I have only really used them on lime, or what our American friends would call basswood. So if you're new to carving, lime is sometimes known as the carver's wood. It's reasonably fine-grained and strong enough to hold quite good detail, but it's soft enough to carve quite easily. It's kind of an ideal timber to use. If I'd carved oak or hickory or one of the denser fruit woods with these, then no doubt I would have had to put more effort into maintaining an edge on them. But just carving lime for more than 12 months now, I haven't taken these to an oilstone or whetstone. I've only stropped them on leather strop with the Flexcut Gold polishing compound, and they've maintained a more than adequate edge. The way the blades are mounted into the handles doesn't look too aesthetically pleasing, but I've had no problems with it, seem to be pretty strong. Flexcut say that this ergonomic shape is one of their big selling points, one of their main features, and I was a little bit concerned, to be honest, whether it would really suit me when compared with a symmetrical handle, because it looks like it's engineered to only be held like this, which is fine for some cuts, but a lot of the time I might be holding the knife like this and drawing it towards me across the workpiece. But actually I've found them to be really comfortable. They are very good. Now, ergonomics of a knife handle might seem like a minor consideration, but if the handle makes your hand sore or causes fatigue, just is frustrating to use, then you're not going to be focused and you're not going to be producing your best work. So it does have an effect. I mentioned the Flexcut Gold polishing compound, which you get a little block of it with that set of knives along with the tool roll and the knives themselves, and I said it was worth saying a few words about this. I don't know why, but this stuff seems to be controversial. If you look on carving forums and things online, some people absolutely hate this stuff, and I can't fathom why. I've not had any problem with it, apart from the fact it does stain everything. Put this stuff down on any surface, no matter how impermeable, and it will leave a yellow mark on it. So just be warned that you need to be careful how you store this stuff. Don't, for example, unpackage a load of tools where you've got another bar of this, leave it on a coffee table, go and dispose of the packaging, get distracted, leave it there for a couple of days, and then let your wife or girlfriend move it and go, oh, there's a suspicious yellow looking stain on the table, because it doesn't go down well. It works fine. I've only used that on a strop to maintain the edge on these tools for more than 12 months. And as I say, I've only carved lime in that time, not particularly dense, hard woods. But it performs well, I haven't had any problems with it. Some people will say that it clogs the strop, but every sharpening compound will do that to an extent. Just give it a clean with some methylated spirits and it's absolutely fine. So in conclusion, these knives perform really well. The build quality is good. The blades are exceptionally sharp straight out of the packaging, probably the best of any tool I've ever purchased. They've maintained an edge well in the use that I've made of them so far in 12-18 months. Handles are comfortable, they've remained tight, there's no issues with reliability, and I think they are reasonable value for money, they're reasonably priced. So would I recommend buying Flexcut carving knives? Yes, absolutely. Would I recommend buying this particular set? Perhaps not. As I say, the detail knife for me isn't actually fine enough and pointy enough to work on true detail, so I think I'll be probably buying a small detail knife and just using this on the odd occasion where I need to fit it into a small space on a carving but I'm not really working on fine detail. And the cutting knife really does fall into no man's land between that and the roughing knife. There's very little I can't do with the roughing knife that I can do with the cutting knife. Because that straight cutting edge is less useful for the insides of curves, something like the pelican knife or the small pelican knife would probably be a lot more useful as an addition to this set. So although it would cost a little bit more, what I would perhaps suggest is a good idea that people do is basically make up their own set. So I would probably have the roughing knife, fine detail knife, and either the pelican knife or the small pelican knife. Thanks for watching, I hope this review helps you out. I would recommend these with the caveats I've mentioned. If you do get some, then I think you'll enjoy using them, and happy carving and good luck.